is communism? The word communism comes from Latin word communis, which means commons or belonging to all. Communism is a philosophy of government or society who are based on the ideas of Marxism and socialism. A government where people should walk fairly and were paid equally. As a philosophical, social, political, economic ideology and movement whose ultimate goal is the establishment of communist society, namely a socio-economic order structure upon the ideas of common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and the state. There are three beliefs of communism. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and people wanted to make everything equal. Beneficial ideas, characteristic of communism. So, when you see this characteristic in a country or society, it can be called as communism. So, first, people are equal. Second, every citizen can keep a job. And third, there is an internally stable economic system. And fourth, strong social communities are established. And fifth, competition doesn't exist. And sixth, efficient distribution of resources.
We're discussing about the history of communism. So first, in the 5th century, Mazdak movement in Persia was described as communistic. So Mazdak movement was led by Mazdak, was a priest in a religious sect in Persia that was established by his father. He said that he was sent by God to preach that all are born equal. When he saw that the friend of his father and nobles are the only one who enjoy life and have the privilege to have a lot of food and drinks, this is the reason why he challenges privilege of noble classes and clergy. He criticized institutions for private property, strive for egalitarian society. Next, in 16th century, Thomas More wrote Utopia, portrayed communistic thoughts, a society based on common ownership of property. So, in this utopia, portrayed as an egalitarian society for the good of everyone. So, why he wrote this book is because of the reason that there was an unfair distribution of wealth in England, in which he says that everyone or the utopian should entitled to have education, expected to wear same clothes, entitled to have 8 hours of sleep, and entitled to work same hour as each other. So next, in 1830, Karl Marx studies philosophy and literature in Trier High School where he met Alexis van Dern. So who is Alexis van Dern? Alexis van Dern is the one who teaches Karl Marx about the corrupted capitalism, in which he explains the industrialization and private ownership on society. Next. In 1895, Frederick Engels published The Condition of Working Class in England. So Engels wrote this book when he was 24 years old, in which he discussed the living condition and reveals the class oppression that he observed in England. Next, 1848, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels published the Communist Manifesto in Paris. Slogan, Workers of the World Unite. So, this Communist Manifesto was composed of 40-page pamphlet that tackles about the class should disappear and humanity would live in harmony, which encourages the working class to defeat the capitalism and achieve victory in the class conflict.
Good afternoon everyone. Mag-discuss ako about history of communism
starting sa year na 1887. So, noong 1887, Vladimir Lenin's brother named Alexander was killed dahil siya ay isang member ng terrorist faction na ang name ay People's Will Party. Ang layunin ng People's Will Party ay labanan ang autocracy gamit ang terrorism dahil ang People's Will Party ay isang program inspired by Marxism. Noong 1895 naman, si Vladimir Lenin ay inaresto sa St. Petersburg, Russia, with the other members of the Union for the Struggle for the Liberation of the Working Class. So, ito ay isang organization na sinusuportahan ng mga strikes ng workers at sila ay ina-educate about sa mga ideyas na meron ang Marxism. Noong 1900, si Vladimir Lenin ay gumawa naman at nag-launch ng newspaper na ang name ay Iskra or The Spark. Ang layunin naman nito ay pagsamasamahin muli ang mga Russian Marxist groups scattered all around their country para bumuo pa ng isang mas unified na grupo. Noong 1917, nakabuo sila ng group named Bolsheviks led by Vladimir Lenin at considered ito as the first communist government. So nakapag-gain sila ng suporta from the Russian factory workers and peasants dahil nangako si Vladimir Lenin na bibigyan sila nito ng bread, land, and peace. Noong July 1, 1921, dahil ng China ay na-inspired sa Russian Revolution, bumuo sila ng sarili nilang party, which is the Communist Party of China. At noong January 21, 1924, namatay si Vladimir Lenin dahil sa stroke at the age of 54 at General Secretary niya noon si Joseph Stalin. Later on, si Joseph Stalin ang naging premier of the Soviet Union, naging dictator siya at kung sino man na nag-uupo sa kanya ay ginagamitan niya ng manipulation at terror at pagbibigay ng threats. Noong 1940 to 1979, ipa-flash na lang yung mga bansa na nakapag-establish ng communism dahil masyado siyang madami. By force man or hindi, nagkaroon ng communism sa mga nasyon na ito. Thank you.
Hi, I'll be the one who discuss the advantages and disadvantages of communism. So, the first that I will discuss is the advantages of communism. So, the first advantages of communism is it is work effectively as a centrally planned economy. So, communism governments have the power to mobile economic resources to quickly on whatever scale is needed for any project. It can create industrial power with a single request form from those who in charge, executing massive power that would take other economies years to plan. It is able to move so effectively towards large scale. Result because this government structure has the power to override the self-interest of individual it support. So it can achieve its social goals because it subjugates the welfare of the populations. So next. So the second advantages of communism is it creates equality on a level that capitalism can never offer. So the idea of communism is that capitalist societies will eventually crumble because the weight of wealth on the top of the poor will eventually cause the system to become top-heavy. So critics in the United States would point out that Americans are coming close to the outcome already. When a government follows the philosophy of Karl Marx, to their honest intent, then each person should be receive an equal chance to pursue the opportunity that are important to them. Some parts there are still oligarchy, and some government official who gets to enjoy the weight of wealth on their shoulder in a communist structure, but the average person get to pursue what they want You you don't get advantages because your household has more than the one next to you. So people get to succeed based on their strength. So the third advantages of communism is it can transform the shape of an economy to the vision of the leaders. So the United States typically see a transition of political power every 4 or 8 years based on the result of local, state, and national election. When one party begins on a transformation process, the other party typically stops the forward momentum when they come into power. This process effectively limits the amount of change that is possible to the overall societal framework. So, communist countries are different. Many of the leaders are in charge for life. Even though they might not hold a title from monarchy, this structure makes it easier for the leadership to transform the economic vision of the country to what the person in charge wants. So recent examples include Cuba with Castro, Russia with Stalin, and China with Mao. So the next is the disadvantages of communism. So the first disadvantages of communism is the government own everything, including property, business, and production means. So the most significant disadvantages of communism is the fact that it eliminates the free market from domestic society. So that means there are no laws of supply and demand available to set the prices for consumer to pay. So this issue causes the planners to lose the feedback. They need to understand what is the necessary for the production cycle and what could use an upgrade. There is no up-to-date information about what they need of the consumer happen to be either. So because of these disadvantages, it is not unusual for the government to produce too much of one item and too little of another. Surpluses and shortage in critical need areas can be strong enough at times that government disruption can occur. So the second disadvantages of communism, there is no freedom of speech in the typical communist government. So the needs of the government are the indistinguishable from the best interests of society in a communist system, which means the idea of individual freedoms is incompatible with the ideology being practiced. The only reason to suppress this right is to keep those who are in power from losing it, which is why there are restrictions made on individual expression, journalistic thoughts, and other challenges to the action of the government. Even Karl Marx, who is vilified because of his idea involving socialism, argued in favor for the people to have a right of expression. He even defended the free press in such a society, stating that censoring this idea would lead to the implementation of a class he referred to as to the bourgeoisie elite. Marx said that censorship is a tool that the power always used to oppress the powerless. So the third disadvantages of communism is central planning is challenging to achieve in a communist government. So although the government can mobilize significant resources for almost any need at the moment, notice through the structure of communism, there is a difference between the ability to centrally plan and its overall implementation. So because a free market doesn't exist under this structure, the citizens will set up black markets to help them trade the items they want or need that are not a part of the planner's provision. So these advantages destroy the trust that is found in the pure vision of communism. The goal is to give people what they want according to who they are as individuals. So communism looks at each person as a resource, provides them a common set of basic essential, and then expect compliance under the threat of further freedom restriction.
Now let's talk about the communist state. Communist state is also known as Marxist and Lenin state. It's a state that is administered and governed by a single communist party guided by Marxism Leninism. So the perspective of communism is always we talk on how Marxism and Leninism also contributed on that. Marxism is reflected to Karl Marx. Leninism is Lenin and Stalin, and it's typically administered by a single central party apparatus. If we try to look at it, there's a limited communist state arising in our world right now, but there's only be ruled by only one or single apparatus or a single one person. And next, as of February 2018, there's only five communist states: the China, the Laos, Cuba, Vietnam, and North Korea. Possibly, if we trace it in that, there's only one country from America and four countries in Asia, particularly in Southeast Asia. So now let's talk about the communism per continent. Number one is in Africa. Communism in Africa, literally, there's no communist state right now. But there's an arise communism party, by which there's a conflict between Cuba citizen and an Indian, by which it is possibly created a tremendous reason for communism in their country. There is a virtually no communist influence in the Rhodesias, Nyasaland, or British East Africa. Although in the latter, the presence of the continuity of white settlers and a still larger immigrant Indian minority provides tension of considerable potential for communist exploitation. There is no communism state in Africa. Next, communism in America. Right now, there's only one entitled na nagsasabi komunista sila na bansa. That is Cuba. By which Cuba right now, if we go back to their history, 1960s to 2008, there's only ruled by only one person who proposing a communism and wanting communism in the country. The Soviet had a communist dictatorship and opposed capitalism, but the Americans had a capitalist democracy and opposed communism. Americans reject the ideology of communism, but there is only one country that I said earlier, the Cuba. Then in America, they make a containment. Containment is an agreement after World War II, possibly in the Cold War, by which they are agreeing in the one decree na we will not accept communism in America and we will reject the idea of every communist leader. But in America, there is a lot of communist party, particularly the Comunista Partido sa America. They are proposing communism, but the reason why there's not rising in every country is because of the people. People not want communism. Next, communism in Asia. Communism in Asia, there's only one question that always be thinking for us. What did China and the rest East Asia is always be the ground of communism? Bakit laging yun yung mga lugar na may komunista mga leader? Right now, communism victory means communist rule in China and North Korea, as well as the introduction of the wild card in a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now we have four remaining communist states in Asia, particularly in East Asia. That is the China, Laos, Vietnam, and North Korea. So China, we know that Mao Zedong have a big contribution of the arisement of communism in their country. Right now, kung makikita natin, yung namumuno ngayon, komunista pa rin ang pinopropose nila. Next, Laos. In 1949, the nation won independence from France. In 1986, it began decentralizing control and encouraging private businesses and promoting the capitalism and eventually the arisement of communism. And if we go back to the history, China have a big implication to the communism not only in Asia but in the entire world. It is a combination between the Germany, Russia, and China. Next, the communism in Europe. The communism in Europe, right now, there's no communist state, but there's a lot of communist group. So if we go back to the history, we have Eastern Bloc. Eastern Bloc is also known as Communist Bloc. It is the representation of the Eastern Europe, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. By which, right now, kita natin na dahil sa block na to, nagkaroon ng komunista sa bawat partikular na lugar in Asia and Europe.
And at the same time, the collapse of the Berlin Wall was the culminating point of the revolutionary changes sweeping East Central Europe in 1989. Throughout the Soviet bloc, kahit nawala na yung Soviet Union, there's only a reason why kailangan pa nating panatilihin ang pagiging komunista, particularly in China and North Korea. Next, Romania became the only communist state in Europe, 1947 to 1965. But, just like I said earlier, right now, to overthrow its government without violence, the use of the term Iron Curtain as a metaphor for strict separation goes back at least as far as the early 19th century. But now, if we trace the form of the government, medyo nagbabago na sila ng ng gobyerno. They will styling a mixed economy and mixed government as well. Next is communism in Oceania. Right now, there's no communist state in Oceania, but there's a 3 communist group arising. Number 1 is the Communism Party in Australia. It's a political party in Australia founded 1971 as a Socialist Party of Australia. Number 2 is the communism in New Zealand. They are proposing communism in their country. Number 3, the Oceanian communism. It is the combinations and binubuo ng iba't ibang komunistang leader particular sa buong rehiyon nila. So, to sum up, only the Asia and America right now ang mayroong communist state. So, let's talk about some people known for communism. Number 1 is Karl Marx. Karl Marx is the father of communism. Number 2, Friedrich Engels. We know that year 1848, Engels and Marx wrote Communist Manifesto, by which they are proposing that communism is good, and at the same time they are providing some advantages and disadvantages of the ideology. Next, Vladimir Lenin and Stalin. We know that Stalin and Lenin have a big implication of the Soviet Union, and that's why they are recognized as communist and revolutionary leaders. Next, Mao Zedong, also known as Chairman Mao, is a founder of the People's Republic of China. Next is Leon Trotsky, and next is Kim Il-sung, and founder of North Korea with his son Kim Jong-il, by which sila yung founder and the second supreme leader of North Korea. Next, Ho Chi Minh. We know that Ho Chi Minh is the former president of Vietnam and at the same time the founder of Indochina Communist Party. Ho Chi Minh believed that communism is an instrument to supreme and to have a big power not only for every leader but in their country. Ang komunista po nabigay sa kanila ng kapangyarihang makalaya sa iba't ibang isyong panlipunan. Next, Nikita Khrushchev is a Soviet politician and at the same time an communist leader. Next, si Fidel Castro. He is the former prime minister and former president of Cuba na siyang nag-insist ng communism in their country. Next is Joseph Broz Tito, was a Yugoslav communist revolutionary and the former president of Yugoslavia. And lastly, Lin Biao, Marshal of the Republic, the People's Republic of China. Right now, all the communist leaders precisely from the rest of Russia, China, and a lot of American regions. But until now, they are still looking at communism is good in some view. Kahit wala na sila, kahit sila ay mga namatay na, subalit ang kanilang legacy in communism and influence is always be arises. Thank you.